But we're going to finish off day 2 strong. We have some great presentations. It's going to be a little bit of a shorter session this afternoon. But we're going to go ahead and start Symposium 5 on dosage form quality challenges, but also success stories. So again, I'm Nathan Reed. I'm a chemist in OPQ, and we're going to have presenters today, starting with Kwok. He's going to be talking about quality challenges and considerations in drug-device combination products. He is a senior pharmaceutical quality assessor in OPQ. Next, we'll have 2 case studies, industrial perspectives on quality challenges and successes. The first case study will be presented by Satya Patil on injectable device development success driven by patent-centric approaches. After that, we will be hearing a presentation from Claire McDiarmid. On this case study, they will look at demonstrating generic substitutability when considering differences in user interface beyond the stats. Claire is a senior director in user interface, risk management, and global device dev at Viatris. So without further ado, I'll move on to our first speaker today for this Symposium 5, Kwok.
Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Friday. I'm just come between you and your weekend. My name is Kwok. I'm the application technical lead for quality assessment of generic drug product. Today, I'm going to address quality challenges and key consideration in drug device combination product. Our OPQ mission is to assure the availability, safety, and efficacy of every dose. So to gain insight into combination product challenges, we should take a closer look at the current combination product landscape. So first of all, there's a wide variety of combination product available in the market. Just for parenteral, we have prefilled syringe, IV bag, and various types of injectors. Secondly, there's a rising trend in complexity and innovation to advance patient care. Now we have both biodegradable and removable implants preloaded in applicator for sustained drug release. We have wearable on-body injector programmed for drug delivery. And inhaler with electronic module that records, store, and transmits data to your cellular phone. So in the recent time, there's a growing trend also toward digital health. So lastly, regulations are constantly evolving to ensure safety, effectiveness, and quality. So the recent QS Quality System Regulation Amendment are an example of FDA effort to harmonize with other regulatory authorities and modernize the regulation. So knowing the landscape better, you can see that combination product poses technical, scientific, and regulatory challenges, while also offering opportunity to enhance quality assessment. So to begin with, we have typical product development study and test method, but may not be applicable to demonstrate suitability in relationship to functionality and performance of device constituent parts, especially when they are complex. And we may have to rely on related guidance, industry standard, and or best practice when specific guidance has not been published. Also, we have external and internal researchers work may be required to address any scientific knowledge gaps and regulatory assessment of complex generic products. So as a result, additional in vitro characterization study and control strategy may be requested. Lastly, current regulatory guidance and policy are evolving, as we all know, and with respect to expectation. So good understanding of and keeping up with the regulatory update is essential for product lifecycle management. So to navigate today's quality challenges, we're going to walk through some key quality consideration of ANDA submission, quality frameworks, quality risk assessment, suitability, control strategy, and how do you seek feedback from FDA. So under SDH, we have a good foundation of quality framework starting from M4Q on reproducibility of the dose delivery. Q1A, Q6A on functionality testing. To the more recent ICQ12 on management of post-approval CMC changes, including combination product. And it's also very important that to apply Q8, 9, and 10 during the drug product life cycle to assure drug product qualities. So in parallel with ICH guidance, we also have guidance on container closure systems that emphasize suitability for their intended use. So to address CMC requirement, FDA also published guidance documents specific to various dosage forms. So we have injectors, syringes, inhalation and nasal product, to transdermal and topical delivery system. And as I mentioned earlier, regulations are constantly evolving. A recent ruling determined that ophthalmic dispensers are also regulated as drug-led combination product. And last December, we also published quality consideration topical ophthalmic drug products. So for original ANDA submission, we have a multidisciplinary assessment team from OPQ and OGD. So OPQ will review all the quality aspects of an ANDA submission. For OGD, they will review bioequivalence, user interface assessment, which was discussed very nicely on day one, also this morning, and labeling. So we know that it's a combination product. So we may also consult a colleague like Karen for the CTRX consult if they are for emergency use or it has a technical, logically complex device constituent part. So we have two consults we normally initiate. One is device engineering performance. We will look at the design control and essential performance requirements. And also the other one, device qualities, system and facility assessment. So just a heads up on, based on what I think for the lot today and this morning, we have a lot of overlapping on what we assess from different center offices. We look at mostly on the quality and pharmaceutical equivalence. I think OGD will look at bioequivalence interface, and CDRH will look at the acceptability of the device constituent part. So here I want to say that is we all have a common goal and we want to achieve timely and also efficient ANDA approval by working collaborative together. So let's jump into the submission. As a reminder, we want to identify your combination product by checking your FDA 356H form, the box 24. You should check it's a combination product. If it's a combination product, this will help to facilitate the review of combination product, including the CGMP and also post-marketing safety reporting requirements. So for drug product development, the QBD principle can be applied. You can establish a QTPP to ensure the desired quality. And on the right-hand side of the table, capture the QTPP elements of a generic combination products. And you can provide a rationale for selection of a CCS, including your device constituent part. And also you can include the device functional property requirement. So these elements will help to support your pharmaceutical equivalence of your proposed generic combination product. Together with bioequivalence, we can demonstrate therapeutic equivalency to the ROD. So for risk assessment, you want to identify the CQA, such as dose accuracy and performance tests. And you want to also identify the CPP and CMA that have potential impact on CQA. And for example, you want to create a table to look at the primary packaging component, such as siliconization of inner surface of a syringe. On the drug product CQA, like particulate, and performance tests related to the friction between the glass syringe surface and the plunger stopper, as well as unit operation, device dosage, device assembly on the dose accuracy, if there could be increased risk. So before I get to the next point is, you also should provide us certification and data to mitigate the risk from high to low. So furthermore, comparative physiochemical in vitro characterization and device performance data of the test product and ROD should be provided for evaluation. So when you are developing a complex generic drug product, you want to check the PSG product specific guidance, because that describes the FDA current thinking and expectation on how to develop a generic combination product that is equivalent to the ROD. So here's a suspension drug product. If you pick option 1, then you will have to provide particle size distribution, in vitro drug release, as well as comparative physiochemical characterization, such as sedimentation rate, volume, and viscosity. So since some of these tests can be considered as CQA, so you may want to include these tests in your drug product specification. So in terms of the device, the ROD actually come in as a vial or prefilled syringe co-packaged with a needle. If you select a prefilled syringe as your CCS, you want to examine and compare the needle gauge and the length with the ROD. Just to give you another example, diacylglucagon injection presented as an injector. Since this drug product is a peptide injectable product, Q1, Q2, and API sameness is required. In terms of auto-injector characterization, you want to test and compare ejection time, trigger force, delivered volume, extended needle length of your test product with the ROD. Since some of these tests is crucial to ensure device drug delivery function, you may also want to consider including those tests in your drug product specifications. So as far as for CCS qualification, you need to demonstrate suitability, protection, compatibility, safety, and performance. The last point is the key consideration for combination product. So one topic I want to raise here is extractable leachable that has posed challenges during product development. So basically, your packaging component should not leach or migrate any undesirable amounts of substances into your drug product. So to mitigate this risk, you should conduct the study per USP 1663 and 1664. So some of the common deficiencies are inaccurate calculation of AET, lack of identification of the leachable about AET and their toxicology assessment. Last but not least, analytical methods also not sensitive enough for reachable quantification. And per FDA current thinking, for parental drug product, you can use an SCT of 1.5 microgram per day. For chronic use and less chronic use, you can use 5 microgram per day. And just a quick update on topical ophthalmic in the guidance last year, you can also use IT of 10 ppm and QT of 20 ppm for your extractable and leachable assessment. So let's talk about the performance and functionality. That is its ability to function in the manner for which it was designed. You should demonstrate the device can deliver the product in an accurate and reproducible way, and your test conditions to simulate the use of the drug product closely per labeling. So here's some common example of parental combination product. I think some of the stuff have been talked about this morning. It was covered very nicely. It was a very excellent talk again. But here we don't mind repetitive, right? So for prefilled syringe, we all know what the performance test will be. For a pen injector that require manual attachment of a needle pen, you can consider the following performance test. In comparison with a pen injector, however, auto injector that with an attached needle already and feature an automated function. Additional performance tests may include injection time and extended needle length. So lastly, the on-body injector that can adhere to your skin and also can deliver the dose automatically over a specific period. A performance test unique to this design feature. You can include dose delivery time, dose delivery profile, and adhesion pure force. So after looking at all this example, it may be obvious, but I think it's worthwhile to mention that the performance test, the specific performance test can vary from device to device, and they can depend on your device design of your proposed generic combination product. And as the complexity increase, additional performance force may be required to ensure device drug delivery function. And again, since due to the complexity of this injector, CDRH will look at the design verification and validation, performance tests, and the data as they have mentioned this morning. So moving on to control or combination product, a control strategy should ensure consistency of your drug product quality. And control strategy can be based on the product risk profile, the number and the type of control can be based on your complexity of design and manufacturing. And for example, the product and process control may be less stringent, will definitely be less stringent for prefilled syringe, non-emergency use than an auto injector for emergency use, which is considered high risk. And performance tests and absolute criteria should be appropriate to the particular dosage form, route administration, and design features. So in addition, your test methods should follow companion USP 1697382 and 1382. Those in red because they are not official yet until 2025. And they're talking about the suitability of your stopper and functionality of the stopper testing. For example, your test methods should comply with 11040 series for prefilled syringe. And I think this one we have gone over again, the 1106 series very nicely. So I think similarly, actually CEDAR has also a similar program for recognition of consensus standard. And you can refer to this guidance for more details. So why and what's so critical to perform performance tests of your proposed generic drug product? Just take an auto-injector as example. This is to ensure the device drug delivery function of intended dose to the target site from initiation to completion of the injection with the specific period of injection time per labeling. So as, for example, if your auto-injector labels say you have to hold down your auto-injector for 10 seconds, so those should be delivered completely within 10 seconds. So for generic, for assessment of generic combination product, this test should be considered and compared with the RLD. So let's come to the QC example, number one, an injectable solution drug product in an auto-injector. So for the drug product spec, you want to include the product quality attribute of an injectable solution product per USP1, and you can test it at release and or stability. In addition, we recommend you to include the device performance attribute of an auto-injector as shown here. Generally speaking, you should provide the absolute criteria with justification, and some common deficiency are lack of description for integrity of the device constituent part, and reporting the value only without setting the absolute criteria for QC control. This is the second QC example, injectable suspension drug product in a prefilled syringe. So beside the universal test common to parental dosage form per USP1, for a suspension drug product, you may consider this quantitative test as described here. So to ensure the serviceability that there's no clogging during preparation and administration, you will have to conduct the serviceability test using the appropriate needle and gauge per labeling. For the prefilled syringe spec, you may include break loose for glide force, and to ensure the dose accuracy of a simple syringe, you may apply USP 697 to ensure the deliverable volume as declared on the label. Here come to my last slide. The only thing I want to say here is if you have a question and you want to have a more interactive discussion with the agency, it is recommended you submit a pre-end meeting request, especially involved with drug product development or complex product as defined in GDUFA 3 commitment letter. This is because especially as soon as feasible for your drug product development planning. So in this short period of time, I have gone over some key consideration for quality, and given the evolving landscape of combination product, we are committed to develop guidance and program to ensure timelier introduction of high quality and affordable generic combination product for the benefits of the patient. So I want to thank you, the following people from my office, for their support and guidance, and thank you all for your attention.
Thank you so much. Next up, we will have Satya Patil from Sun Pharmaceutical talking about injectable device development success driven by a patent-centric approach.
Good afternoon to all. So today I'm going to present a case study on injectable device development success driven by patient-centric approach. So it's a standard disclaimer. Information is the presenter's view, not the company's view. In this success, a drug device combination product success, we will talk about brief about the drug device combination product. Then we will see how the device platform was selected and the subsequent development carried out, considering the patient-centric approach, and then the comparison between reference and Sun device, then the approvals for drug device combination products and launches in various markets. Then after launch, there were some post-market surveillance activity, what we did during that activities, and then lastly we will say corrective and preventive actions taken driven by the patient-centric approaches. And we will also see the success factors with this injectable device development. As you can see on the slide, it's an auto-injector. The image shows there is an injection button, it has a label, it has inspection window, and through that inspection window, a patient can easily see the medicine, whether it's a clear and colorless, and there would be pre-filled syringe inside in an auto-injector, and it will have the white needle shield, which basically we call it as a cap. So the product name is sumatriptan succinate injection, 6 milligram per 0.5 ml auto injector. It is indicated to treat migraine and cluster headaches. And the dosage is one dose of 6 milligram as and when required, and there will not be more than 2 injections in 24 hours. The volume it delivers is 0.5 ml, which is 500 microliter. And as the image shows, the form of this product is in single dose disposable auto injector. So we'll see what are the basically the considerations while selecting the device development platform, and also going to carry those platform for further studies like the design validation and then stability and all those studies, and how those are driven by patient-centric approach. The first and important thing is the technology platform, which is most important, whether the technology for the proposed device is a single dose disposable, or it's a multiple dose, or whether it's a injection is delivered by automatically, or needle insertion is automatically. So a lot of things needs to be considered during selection of the technology. Then it will go to the whether it's fit for intended use. So we need to consider the intended use, whether intended use is for chronic use, or whether it is for acute purpose. Both migraine and all these kind of cluster headaches, those are not the chronic or maintenance kind of thing therapies, but it's acute therapies. So an intended use mostly related to the safety and efficacy. In this case, it is driven by drug, but however, we are having the device. So drug device combination product is also safe and also effective. Then we also need to consider the performance aspects of the device. In performance, as our several presenters told that in particular in auto-injector platform, that there are several types of performing tests. As primary functions needs to be evaluated during the performance assessment. The next one is usability. Once you have the technology platform, it's fit for intended use, it's again performing within the specification, but what about the usability aspects of the device, whether the patient which we are going to target is going to use it as intended or not. So that is also the most important aspects of the drug device combination product. And the last one is the safety. Safety here, basically what additional safety my device is going to give to the patient. So safety is it's not just related to the safety and efficacy of the drug, but the safety and efficacy of drug device combination product. And if I can add some additional features of safety so that there will not be any kind of injury to the patient or any harm to the patients. So with that, we have selected, and also we considered some additional patient-centric approaches as compared to the reference devices. So whether the device which we are proposing has a similar number of operating steps or lesser number of operating steps for successful injection, whether it's compatible with the same needle with the same needle gauge of the references, or whether there will be a thinner needle or maybe different gauge of the needle. And I'm going to give some needle hiding feature with the device to prevent the needle phobia and needle stick injury. Another thing is that whether the device also give the patient confidence to confirm the full dose delivery or not at the end of injection. And another patient-centric approach is whether the device is easy to carry, to store, and transport. And some of the aspects of this patient-centric are also controlled by regulatory guidance as well as ISO standards. So what we consider, the first thing is the task. The Sun device with lesser number of major operating steps. We can see the label, there are only 4 major operating steps, but however we call it as only 3 for successful injection. And after that the injection is completed, then the device would be lifted from the injection site. So that would be the 4th step. But major operating steps, we call it as a 3-step operating device. The next one is needle. The Sun device is with thinner needle. As compared to the reference device, it has a thinner needle. And Sun device also has the feature which hides the needle before, during, and after injection. So it has a needle lockout feature. So user or patient will not come to know whether needle is inside there or not. So that's also important aspects of the device. There would be an inspection window to confirm the drug delivery. This will enhance the patient confidence that the patient will be confident that injection has been completed and dose has been delivered. So that is also important aspect. And portability, what we have seen in previous slide, that whether it's easy to carry, to store, or handle. In this case, what we are targeting is a migraine and cluster headache. It can occur at any place during travel, at home, and outdoor settings. So we need to consider whether patient can take that device and it's easy to store, handle, and whether it's a portable or not. So as you have seen, Sun device is with fully assembled pre-filled auto-injector in disposable form. So quickly we'll see the comparison between reference versus Sun device. As a reference device is Imitrex device. It has 3 major components. It's a pen as well as a carrying case and also the cartridge pack. However, in case of a Sun device, it's as we talked about that it's only one component, fully assembled pre-filled pen. So there is a difference, 3 component versus 1 component. Another comparison between reference and Sun device, as we have seen, the major components are 3 components: pen, carry case, and cartridge pack. Sun device is a single dose, single component, ready to use, pre-assembled and disposable device, pre-filled disposable device. Major operating steps, if you compare between reference and Sun, then you will find that reference has several operating steps, like it has to open the lid of the carry case, then remove the tamper-proof seal from one cartridge. But in case of Sun device, only the white needle shield has to be removed before injection. Then in case of reference device, load the pen with the cartridge, which is not, that step is not in case of Sun device. However, push the loaded pen firmly against the injection site is the operating step in reference, and Sun also has the same operating step. Press injection button to deliver the dose. It's a common operating step in both the device. And lastly, unload the used cartridge back into the refill pack, but Sun device is the pre-filled auto-injector, single dose auto-injector disposable. So it is not required to be loaded in a used cartridge pack and all. So that operating step is not there. Apart from that, like we have done the comparison like in operating steps and labeling and all those things, maybe dimensional comparison and all those things, but comparative performance testing was also important. As of now, there is a guidance in comparative performance testing as well as the comparative usability. But during that time, since 10 years back, so the guidance was not there for comparative human factor study, but comparative performance testing was being carried out. And as most of the presenters told that there will be several performance tests for auto-injector like cap removal force, needle cover pre-injection force, activation force, dose accuracy, injection depth, and injection time. These tests are common between reference and Sun device, but there are certain additional tests in case of Sun device, which is needle cover override force and separation force. This is to enhance the quality of the device, because during application of the device, user should not disassemble the device, try to reuse the device, or there should not be any harm to the patient that while doing the disassembly and all those things. And it's a not reusable device, so these tests are applicable in case of Sun device, but in case of RLD it was not applicable. So we found that functional performance between reference and Sun device is comparable and equivalent. So this is the carton. Basically, this is drug device combination product, has two devices in a tray, plastic tray, and it would be inside the carton. And these drug device combination products got approval in several market as an ANDA in US, and then in decentralized procedures in European Medicine Agency in Europe. We got approval in Germany, Denmark, Spain, France, UK, Italy, the Netherlands, Norway, and Sweden. We got approval in New Zealand as well. We got approval in Canada, and then Australia as a category 1 generic device. Now, once the device was approved, it was launched, millions of the devices sold in several years. And again, we started doing the post-market surveillance activity. So that is also the part of our part of regulation, and it's a part of our device development program. So post-market surveillance activity, once the device sold in millions of quantity, we have received complaints from the various markets. As we have not included the number to avoid any kind of misinterpretation of the complaints, but we have taken in terms of percentage, though the complaints are in few in numbers. And we investigated those complaints, though mostly the complaints are related to the device non-operation. Then we investigated what exactly the device non-operation. We requested the device from the users or patients or whoever is having those devices. We categorize those devices into different type based on the investigation or the result out of the investigation. The first we think is that the devices we received unused, we categorize that. The second one is devices received used, and the devices could not be activated after it's received to us. So we found that 99% complaints are related to the instruction not being followed correctly. And this is based on investigation. Some of the devices we activated satisfactorily at our end during investigation, and we found that there was no issue with device functionality. Only thing, the sequence was not being followed or instruction not been followed, and that's why it was not activated. The next one is devices received used one. Now device was used, we got the device, we investigated, we have taken the CT scan and X-ray, and all the components are disassembled, and then as a scientific way, we compare those components with the specification or something, and we found that there was no issue with the functional performance of the device. And all of these are found that 99% are related to the instruction not being followed correctly. The 1% complaint, which is related to the manufacturing or assembly defect. So it's a very few in numbers, or not even like 2-digit numbers, but 1% complaints are related to the incorrect orientation of rear shell. It has a rear shell as well as front shell. And there was a damaged rear shell rim. So 1% complaints of the parts per million of the devices we sold. It is not the 1% of parts per million, but the basically the number of complaints we received, out of that 1% of complaints are related to the manufacturing defect or defect to the assembly. So we have taken the corrective actions to update the assembly process, to add the sensor during the assembly to ensure that the correct orientation of rear shell as well as correct orientation of pre-filled syringe into the syringe carrier would be there. So that sensor was established, and also we also educated the user for correct uses of the device. So we'll see how the corrective and preventive actions we took during that time. The first corrective and preventive actions we have taken is that basically the root cause or investigation found that the instruction was not being followed. The first corrective action we have taken is to upload the product demo on website to assist the patient to correct use of the device. That is the first and immediate correct action was taken. The second corrective action was taken is to IFU and label revision to include pictorial presentation on showbox as well as on device, and distribution of demo kit or trainer devices to the patient so that they will understand what exactly the correct uses of the successful injection. Third corrective and preventive action is taken to like mobile or computer application showing methodology to operate SUNS sumatriptan device. And all of these corrective actions are to enhance the usability and ensure successful injection. But all of these corrective actions are not enough, because this is just giving the quick or giving some quick feedback or quick kind of support to the patients. But it's not the completely eliminating the possibility of getting the device non-operation or the complaints from the patient. So parallelly, we follow the design where basically the device which has the design, and in that particular design, device needs to be instruction needs to be followed sequentially, then it gets operated. So we also parallelly started working on the change in the device design so that the issue with the non-operation of the device would be completely eliminated. However, after taking the corrective and preventing actions, 3 actions we have taken, kappa 1, kappa 2, and kappa 3. We also measured the how much basically the kappa effectiveness after each and every action. So we found that as a reference point, total number of complaints parts per million, we took it as 100%. Then after implementation of first action, we found that there were reduction up to 59%. So 59% complaints were reduced. Then the next action after implementation, we found that the complaints have been reduced to 40%. And the third action is after that, we found that complaints have been reduced to 23%, but still the 23% number is a bigger one. It's not a complete elimination of the complaint. So, but we observed that reduction in complaints observed after each corrective and preventive actions. So all of these actions are patient-driven. It's basically supporting the patient or educating the patient, but again, it's not sufficient. So parallelly, we started work on the challenges and solutions for sumatriptan drug device combination product. The first thing, the challenge, what is basically related to the device usability, device not operating if sequence of the operation not being followed. So that's the major challenge. The solution for that, we were started working on change the device design from sequence-based to sequence-free operation. That's related to the usability. Second challenge was with the device was with the delivery volume specification. When we got initial approval from US, Canada, and other countries also, and European countries also, that time the regulatory agencies saying that you can have a plus minus 5% as a deliverable volume to the standard fill volume, that some of the countries agreed. Other countries are saying maybe you can compare the device with the reference device with the statistically significant sample size, deliver the dose from the reference device, found that in how much range is there for the deliverable volume, and you also prove that range that your device is also delivering within that range. So one agency agreed on that, other agencies agreed on plus minus 5% for the standard fill volume. So there were different specification limits for different markets in initial approvals. Then after that, what we considered that let's refer the current ISO 1160 type part 1 for system designation. Our device is D1 type. D1 type device means system designation. It means that it delivers the entire content as a dose. So it falls into D1 type system where there is one-sided specification limit is applicable. So we applied at ISO 11608 part 1 D1 type designation. We harmonize the specification for deliverable volume with one-sided deliverable limit. And we have referred the label claim. Label claim says that 6 milligram per 0.5 ml. So we have to ensure that 0.5 ml has to be delivered to the patient. So that lower side limit was applicable, which is not less than 0.5 ml. Another thing is what, because if you want to deliver not less than 0.5 ml, then your standard fill volumes shall be accordingly. So there are change in standard fill volume to meet the deliverable volume. But initially we have agreement with the agencies. Different agencies has a different thought process on that. And there were challenges that at our manufacturing or quality levels, each market has a different standard fill volume for the pre-filled syringe, and also the deliverable volume specification is different. However, based on the ISO 11608 part 1, we harmonize the specification limits for standard fill volume to meet the deliverable volume, which is one-sided limit. So all of these solutions were implemented in a one go, and that we have taken the next cap of action. So here I would like to again provide some information about how exactly the sequence-based operation was as the initial approval. So sequence-based operations, there is a 3-step operating device because there are 3 major steps. The first step is to remove the cap. Second step is to push the device against the injection site and the press activation button. This is a 3-step device. However, in case if the sequence is followed, then only device gets operated. That was the initial approval. And if there was no sequence followed, then device was not operating. So we'll see the with schematic diagram. There was a cap. Now cap is removed. Device is pushed against injection site. Activation button is pushed. And this dose is delivered. This way device was activity because the sequence has been followed. But in case of migraine and headache, we also need to consider the indication. In case of a migraine and headache, there is a possibility that user or the patient will forget the sequence to be followed, because he will just remove the auto-injector from the packet and try to remove the cap and push against the injection site. But during that time, if he forgets the sequence, then device was not getting operated. So let us see, the cap has been removed. Now, instead of pushing needle cover against injection site, unintentionally, patient will push the activation button. Activation button is pushed. And if it is pushed, activation button is pushed, then device was not getting operated. Even it is pressed against injection site, it's not getting operated. There will not be no trigger of internal mechanism. So what we did is, again, we have to again consider the patient, the targeted population or indication with targeted population or patient. So we followed the patient-centric approach. Then we changed the device from sequence-based to sequence-free operation, where after removing of the cap, if the user or patient, he pushes the needle cover against the injection site and press activation button, it will get operated. Reverse way, if he press the activation button and push the device against the injection site, it will also get operated. We will see how does it operate. Cap is removed, it will be pushed against injection site. Now the activation button is pressed, it will get activated. So drug would be delivered, second click will be heard. Now another sequence, cap is removed, and now instead of pushing the device against the injection site, button would be pressed, and then the needle cover would be pressed against injection site, the device will get activated. So in both the cases, device will be activated, a second click will be heard, and this kind of sequence-free operation or sequence-free design we implemented as a corrective and preventive action 4. And we also check the kappa effectiveness after implementing kappa 4. And we found that with respect to the total complaints at the beginning, which was the parts per million, it was a drastic reduction into that, and it has reduced down to 2%. So again, I am saying that it's a percentage, but it's in very few in numbers. It's like you can count it on fingers. So it's totally reduced down to 2%. Now we are hardly getting any complaint to the device, and our marketing team is very much happy with US marketing team and also the European marketing team with implementation of sequence-free design. And I am going to talk about the story of a smart European and noble American. That's the good story of for sequence-free design and all those things. So when I get an opportunity to in a panel discussion, if that time permits, it's a very interesting story about our marketing team. So with that kappa 4, now we are hardly getting any complaints that I already told. Now, what exactly the quality management system we follow for this particular drug device combination product? As my previous presenter told, that there would be a quality management system that we need to demonstrate the compliance at manufacturing site. And how will you demonstrate that you are meeting the regulatory standards as per GMP and CFR and any ISO standards, and all those things are coming. So we are following the drug CGMP based streamline approach in accordance with the 21 CFR 4.40 at manufacturing site. And what exactly is this approach? Is basically we are demonstrating that our site is compatible with the drug CGMP, that we will demonstrate this drug device combination product meets all of those requirements which are there for drug CGMP. Plus, or additionally, we will also demonstrate that it meets the 21 CFR 820.20, which is management responsibility for the device, 21 CFR 820.30 design control for the device, 820.50 for purchasing controls for the device, and 820.100 corrective and preventive action for the device. So this is a streamlined approach for drug device combination product, and we are following at our manufacturing site. But recently, again, FDA has come out with the quality management system. Now it will be ISO 13485 would be referenced into that, and it has now become quality management system, QMSR, quality management system regulation. So we'll look into that. Now, other provisions of device QS regulations for single entity and co-package combination product related to installation and servicing are not applicable here, because those are also very important, because this device is a single dose disposable. So installation and servicing are not applicable for this subjected product, because device would not be installed and serviced. So this is a truly global DDCP. based on harmonized approach. And what is that harmonized approach? We have done the medical device development process, which is basically harmonized to cover all the markets. Like we have seen that US market, Europe market, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. Second thing is performance aspect of the device, which is related to the primary functions. It is driven by the ISO standard. ISO standard is acceptable to all the markets. Safety related to the risk management. Again, it's ISO standard that is also globally accepted. Quality management system, we have seen the QMS. And then last and important thing is that design history file or technical file. So what we did is design history file we compiled is not just related to the US FDA, but it is also like technical file requirements of Europe. We combine all of those things together as a part of technical file or design history file. With this complete dossier, we submitted to the regulatory agencies. What we have seen is previously that it was approved by US, EMA, SC, TG, and MedSafe. This sequence-free design also, we have submitted the complete dossier to US FDA. We got approval in 2019. In Europe, we got the approval with the same dossier, same technical file. We got the approval in, by European Medicine Agency in 2020. In Health Canada, also 2020. Australia, TGA, 2020. New Zealand, MedSafe, 2022. However, the document which we have compiled first for US FDA as a complete part submission, same document or technical file submitted to the European Agency. We still received the comments or queries from the European Medicine Agencies. We have responded those based on technical justification or scientific justification, and they accepted. It's not that the document which is submitted and they have given the approval. We also got a lot of queries from Health Canada. We got a lot of query from New Zealand as well, as compared to other. And you can see the approval was delayed by at least 1 or 2 years from New Zealand. So, but still it is scientific justification and technical understanding. We discussed with the regulatory agency. They accepted our approach and we got this global approval for sequence-free device, and now it's doing good in the market. So, to inform you that this device, drug device combination product has become a treatment of choice in several countries. So it means that treatment of choice means the patient or user are preferring this drug device combination product over the others in the same auto-injector dosage form. So this success story for drug device combination product is basically auto-injector. There are several success factors, and I would like to just present few of them, which are the major success factors. First one is we followed the patient-centric approach. We listened to the patients. We heard to the patient, whatever their complaints. We have immediately taken the corrective and preventive actions. We implemented those. We have also done the effectiveness check of that particular actions and found that it's working well. It's going in the right direction where complaints are reduced down to the almost negligible complaint. So patient-centric approach is important, where patient would be at center. And this approach we consider as an empathetic approach, considering that if I am a patient in all stages of medical device development and product life cycle management, as a developer, we have to consider if I am a patient, what would be there? What type of environment, what type of situation, what type of drug device combination product I will be using that to get my treatment. So patient will be at center. His needs or her needs would be the next one, the characteristics and then environment. The patient needs basically related to the safety and efficacy. That's the most important and mandatory things. Apart from that, the performance and usability of the device constituent parts. Safety and efficacy might be related to the drug, but when it comes to the drug device combination product, it is also safety and efficacy applicable for drug device combination product. And those drug device combination is majorly driven by performance and usability. Now the patient characteristics. There are a lot of things comes to the patient characteristics. While developing a platform or developing a device for certain indications, so I have to consider the health state of the patient or disease state of the patient. Then it's gender and age, that is also important. Strength and dexterity, it's basically age. If you consider the age, then gender, strength and dexterity also come into picture. Then cognitive abilities, whether I am giving instructions or IFU, developing IFU, which would be easy to understand, whether they will follow that or not, or can we have an inbuilt mechanism in the device, which would ensure that even by mistake, the patient does any kind of mistake, by mistake, but the device will work. Like we have a sequence-free device, and if user don't follow the instruction, but still it will work. So that kind of things we need to consider. Education, because self-administration also needs some kind of education. Then mindset of the patient. that we have implemented the needle hiding feature. In most of the countries, people afraid of the needle. If they see the needle, they always develop the needle phobia and all those things. Because giving injection to somebody else is interesting, but taking injection to ourselves is where it's not interesting thing. So we need to consider that mindset as well. Then the weakest condition of this patient could be 70 years of age, 75 years of age, and his or her condition could be not that much to apply the enough force to activate the device. So we need to consider weakest condition of the patient as well. And what are the perceptions? Like in case of Europe and US, self-administration is very popular, but if you compare with the India, it is not popular. So there are a lot of perceptions or other aspects also. Then use environment, whether the drug device combination product which we are developing, it will be used at home environment or at outdoor or in clinical environment. So 3 major settings: home settings, outdoor settings, or clinical settings. And again, the use environment, whether that has a noise level more than 80 decibel, 60 decibel, it's very noisy or crowded place, or all those things we need to consider. So ecosystem for drug device combination product development, lot of science and technologies are coming into this, because this complex, as we are saying, that is a complex generic. So it comes from API, drug substance, then drug product, fill and finish, primary packaging, device design, device manufacturing. Then once those prototyping done, then the human factors, clinical stability, then it goes to assembly and testing automation, then it afterwards labeling and secondary packaging, regulation. After that, regulatory filing, approval, and commercial supply. It goes through all of these states, and everywhere there are a lot of technologies, advanced technologies, traditional technologies. Several experts are coming in. It's basically doctors and engineers product. So like doctors, we need pharmacists, engineers, and all of these things come together to make it a drug device combination product. So this is basically a top level ecosystem for DDCP. So we also had the formal process of medical device development for drug device combination product. During last DDCP 101, we talked about we need to have the process which will talk about what needs to be done, when it needs to be done, and how it needs to be done. So generic industry has, it's quite familiar what needs to be done, because its guidance is already available there, and a lot of ISO standards, regulatory guidance, a lot of support is there. So we know what needs to be done. Now, when needs to be done, this slide will definitely show at what milestone, M1, M2, M3, M4 to M7, what needs to be done at different milestone. This slide would give information on when it needs to be done. Now, what part is covered, when part is also covered. Now, the how needs to be done. How needs to be done is basically covered by ISO standard, regulatory guidance, or product specific guidance, where we are struggling a lot, because there is we need a lot of clarity, we need a lot of information, or we need a process or we may need a template for that, how it needs to be carried out. So this is the formal process we follow. First, we identify the unmet clinical need, then it goes to the define and explore stage. Once that definition or exploration done, or any external vendor, internal resources, or all those things are into place, then we go for the design and development. At the end, we'll have the prototyping. Once that part is covered, it will go to the verification, validation, filing. Filing covers the entire documentation package, which is applicable in several regulatory agencies in several countries like US, Europe, Australia, Canada, and other regulatory agencies. So that will cover all those things. And then after that, once it's get approved, then it goes for the launch or distribution milestone. That is then final method or technology transfer, and then manufacturing with CGMP environment. Then after that, post-market surveillance and product lifecycle management starts. So this is the formal process for medical device development for drug device combination product. With that, I am very grateful to US FDA team, CRCG team, University of Maryland and University of Michigan, Sun Pharma teams, device component manufacturer and suppliers. And I am special thanks to RLD originator. Because of that, we could learn a lot of things and we could implement in a different way. So thank you all.
All right, we have one more presentation for this symposium, Symposium 5, and it's going to be Claire McDiarmid. Claire will be joining us online, so it may take a few seconds to get this squared away, but she will be discussing a talk titled Demonstrating Generic Substitutability when Considering Differences in User Interface Beyond the Stats. So we'll take a second and wait for her to join us online. Hi, Claire, we see you.
Hi, great. Can I check that you can hear me?
Yep, we can hear you and we can see your slides, and it looks like you're about to join in presenter view. Great.
Great. Thank you. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk, and I apologize for not being there in person. It sounds like you've had some very lively debates over the last 2 days. So I'm Claire McDiarmid. I'm from Beatrice, and I'd like to start by saying there's a benefit risk analysis to being the last presenter in a workshop after such a packed agenda. The risk is, and I can tell you that it's already come true, that the audience have already heard nearly everything that I've got to say today. The benefit to that is that I have the objective evidence to show that my position is aligned with the majority of my industry colleagues. And the outcome of that analysis is that I'm going to take this opportunity to reflect on the combined industry call to arms that's driven by our desire to move the dial in this area and to bring high quality complex generics to the market to enhance access and equity to our patients. So with that, I will present the usual disclaimer. The purpose of my presentation is to look beyond the statistical methodology, to look holistically at our approach to substitutability, to reflect on industry's understanding or lack thereof of what the agency are looking for, and how industry are currently approaching comparative use, looking at why we have other design differences. And I'll finish with a case study that precedes the comparative use guidance, but demonstrates an alternative approach to the demonstration of substitutability. So we've heard already that patent restrictions often constrain the user interface design of drug delivery systems for products that are seeking substitutability. And as we heard yesterday, as developers, we intrinsically want to offer the best design to our end users, and this in itself can be a challenge in the generic space. Understanding the risk of use error prompted by any differences in the user interface between the reference and the proposed generic is key to the development of a substitutable combination product. And finally, if we haven't said this enough already this week, the evolution of human factors assessments from the traditional validation studies through to comparative analysis and comparative use human factors has presented industry with a number of challenges. So we've spoken a lot already about the challenges of patent and trade dress. And if we're going to move the dial and work together to bring these generic products to the market, we really can't lose sight of or waste precious time going over these constraints product after product. Instead, we need to agree an approach to acceptance of what are inevitable differences in design. So going back to basics, because I think we need to keep our eye on the target throughout all of these discussions. The brand seeks to demonstrate safe and effective use, looking at the users, the use environment, and the user interface, and understanding whether in the hands of the end user, the user interface imparts any potential for error, which could result in compromised medical care. And as the generic, we are asked to demonstrate substitutability to that reference product, thus confirming safe and effective use. The next two slides just seek to illustrate this, the difference and similarities in the pathways to confirmation of safe and effective use for both the brand, and then as we've seen this lifted this from guidance and the generic. We really don't need to linger here, as we're all aware, and we've heard lots this last couple of days, of the common potential differences and how they arise. So we've heard of patent restrictions, mitigations against known use errors, changes in the current clinical practice and use of platform designs. And where that brings us to is differences in injection preparations, orientation of use, which I'll come back to later, dose selection, number of steps to administer a dose, the method of initiating injections, and reusable versus single use. So we're all clear that these differences are identified through comparative analyses. And we've heard the agency tell us not to be afraid of calling out other design differences, and indeed noting that if we don't find them, the agency will. But then what? We go to comparative use. What is comparative use? Well, at the moment, we seem to be driven to a statistical study design, but there's mention of something else. So let's look at that. We're asked to demonstrate that users can intuitively use the proposed user interface to deliver the intended dose without the addition of new risks. The big question is, why does this need a quantitative study with large numbers when the original demonstration of safe and effective use can be conducted on numbers of 20 per user group? We're hearing from the agency that there may be alternatives to the non-inferiority approach, but we're equally hearing from industry that we can't find a way forward. And I'd be very interested to ask the agency, of all the comparative analyses presented with other design differences, what percentage of those have successfully navigated a non-statistical route to acceptability? As human factors specialists, we are so familiar with the interrogation of root cause and the application of risk management to understand usability. My worry is that the drive to a statistical approach is losing sight of these invaluable qualitative principles. This next slide is a list of questions that are commonly raised, and hopefully many of them were discussed in the in-person sessions yesterday and this morning. I'm particularly concerned about the focus on comparative use, when the outcome of comparative analysis should still hold true for all critical design attributes without other design differences. And also the call to understand what are these other acceptable approaches. Here there are some examples of potential alternative data. And as I said, my question to the industry is, since issuance of the draft guidance, how many of these have been successfully employed in the assessment of other design differences? And I look forward to hearing the outcome of the discussion sessions. Before I work through this case study, I want to say that whilst I'm so proud to have been part of the team who brought this first generic dry powder inhaler to the US market, I really hope that we can stop talking about it. It's almost a decade since we submitted this ANDA, and it's time that we had a wealth of newer case studies to look at. That said, we will again look at Wixela Hub, and I know it's come up a few times in our discussions in the last couple of days. So Wixela Hub is a 4-step dry powder inhaler. 4 steps being open the mouthpiece cover, push down the lever, inhale, and close the mouthpiece cover. They are very similar to the steps used in the use of Advair discus. However, the difference of note is the orientation of intended use, where the InHub inhaler design intent is vertical orientation of use that you can see on the images there, whereas discus is horizontal. In order to demonstrate acceptability of this difference, and I said at the outset that this this case study preceded the draft guidance on comparative use. We conducted a device orientation study, a non-dosing usability assessment, to confirm that intended users, those being naive to dry powder inhalers and discus patients, could use the Inhub inhaler safely and effectively. The Inhub inhaler was presented in its proposed commercial packaging, including the instructions for use. Participants were asked to undertake 3 dose simulations using the inhaler in a simulated home use environment with no training provided. The inhalation profile of those participants was measured to confirm that the participant would be able to inhale a therapeutic dose. And for the user group of discus patients, we also observed them interacting with the discus inhaler and following the same task sequence in addition to Inhub, in order to determine whether their mental model of the use of discus impacted their interaction with the Inhub device. And I should say our sample sizes here, we had 6 distinct user groups, split naive to discus patients, and we followed the traditional human factors validation standard sample sizes of 15 to 20 in our initial sample size development. We had, our user groups are split by age as well. So we had adolescents, adults, and elderly groups. And we took the opportunity to look at IQVIA data on discus sales in the US to understand the split between adults and elderly. And then we adapted our sample size somewhat to mimic that. So in the end, our sample size was N of 15 for the adolescent and elderly groups and N of 25 for the 2 adult groups. So what was the outcome of the study? Well, we confirmed that the key operational steps of the Inhub inhaler were similar to those of the discus, such that the current discus users could demonstrate safe and effective use of the Inhub inhaler and easily switch between devices. We confirmed the Inhub inhaler was intuitive to use, such that users across the demographics of the intended user population, also including those naive to dry powder inhalers, could demonstrate safe and effective use. And we confirmed that in the most case, subjects held the inhaler in the intended orientation. And of those who did not hold the Inhub inhaler in the intended orientation, which we classed as an orientation-related use error, all except 1 still achieved the measured success criteria of peak inhalation flow rate and total inhaled volume. And that 1 patient that did not achieve that, we demonstrated that the same would occur on the discus device. So it was device independent. So the orientation study demonstrated that despite the user interface design difference, subjects could use the inhaler as intended, and there was a low likelihood of device use error that could potentially lead to a patient receiving a subtherapeutic dose. So in summary, we need to open the path to increasing access and equity in the face of inevitable device design differences in the user interface design. Collaborations such as these workshops are so important, but we mustn't drift from one session to another. We need to take big, innovative steps forward. We need to figure out what is practicable and what is acceptable. And fundamentally, we can't lose sight of the human in human factors. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you so much. If I can have all the speakers come back up, and we will have a panel discussion. Slightly smaller panel discussion than what we've had, but I think that we have some exciting topics to go over. So there will be a microphone that'll be passed around as the other sessions have done before. So
one question for I'll start with Claire. Ooh, yes. I'd like to ask Claire. I was wondering, in the Wixella study that you were just presenting, you talked about observing, doing the qualitative observations, root cause analysis. I was wondering if there were any observed behavioral differences between the naive users and the experienced users. I'm not sure I've ever heard data on that, but there's definitely been discussion here in the last couple of days about, real world situations that if you already have generics in the market, you may not have RLD experienced users. And is it important for us to understand what naive users do? And do you have any qualitative thoughts or feedback on what was different between them and what was the same?
Thanks, Katharine. So you've put me on the spot because I said during my presentation, it's nearly a decade since we submitted this. And so taking my memory into account, I would say that the observations that were greatest were the use of instructions for use. So naive patients by far referred to the instructions for use more than experienced patients. And I think that although that reflection wasn't reflected in the outcome of the study, because what we demonstrated was that our device was intuitive to use. Off the top of my head, I can't think of any strong differences between the two user groups other than that. But what I do note is that we do get a lot of observations, a lot of and this comes back to something somebody said earlier on today. We get a lot of observations about people who are mistrained. So experienced users who've maybe been years on a given product, and they will reflect the training that they've had from numerous HCPs or from YouTube or wherever people go. And quite often we see that people have been mistrained. And if anything, that really needs to encourage us to develop eye-catching instructions that are really simple to make people want to look at them, whether that's instructions on labels or instructions on boxes, as well as the paper inserts.
Thanks, Claire. And I know Heidi's waiting. I have one quick question for Satya. The auto-injector for your sumatriptan is a very simple design, one that it sounds like patients navigate very well. Has there been consideration, and I'm just thinking about this from a strategic standpoint, about identifying other products and populations who could also benefit from using that? Is there a benefit for a firm saying, okay, we've designed something that's not only good for sumatriptan, but its simplistic design can also work for these other populations and these other products? And I was just wondering if that's something Sun has explored.
It's a good question. Sun definitely explored several molecules other than sumatriptan. Sumatriptan is indicated for migraine and cluster headaches. The good thing about the device, it has a 3-step device, but user feel that there is a control and he will apply or she will apply the control before the injection is triggered. So the platform is good, it is established very well, and it is for subcutaneous injection. As you have seen, most of the drug device combination product in injectable format, if you see the pen injector, auto injector, they are mostly, or I would say more than 90%, they are subcutaneous injection. So they are delivering the dose subcutaneous portion, which is within 4 to 8 millimeter range. So this kind of platform, if we establish the platform, design platform, and also the subsequent assembly testing methods and release testing and all those things, this can be leveraged to other molecules which would be delivered subcutaneously for other indications. So Sun has definitely considered those, and Sun is working on that. And maybe probably in next few years, you will see the lot of other molecules into that particular device platform coming to the market, because it's a, we see as it's a gold standard for Sun Pharma, as the sumatriptan succinate injection is considered as a gold standard. So it will come to the market.
Hi. Hi. My question is for Satya for the case study. Purely out of curiosity, and I apologize if I missed it in your presentation, but you kept referring to instructions not being followed. What was the root cause why the instructions were not being followed?
Yeah. It's difficult to find the root cause why instructions are not being followed, whether they are not being educated, whether the demo devices or trainer devices not been supplied to them, or whether any video is not available. That could be the reason, as we have seen in one of our slides, that if you implement the corrective actions by providing them demo key, trainer device, educated them, train them, then there is a reduction in the market's complaint. But again, going back, we need to consider the health state of the patient. If a migraine occurs or any cluster headache occurs, so the probable reason is that because it's a headache. If somebody gets headaches, you don't follow the instruction. We can say like that, just remove the auto injector from the package and just try to test it, remove the cap and put it into, put the against the injection sites. And during that process, he forgets or she forgets that instead of pressing the injection button, first we need to press the needle cover against the injection site. Because if the injection button is pressed by unintentionally, and normally the ergonomically, whenever we grip something and if there is a button on that particular object, we normally put a thumb on that. It's a normal way of working, or ergonomically we can say. So that might be the reason they are not following the instruction. It means it's not intentionally, but it's unintentionally. But as a developer, we need to consider that even is the worst case scenario, even by mistake by the user, we should
I
have
don't
that
mean to
mistake
be
proof.
technical here, but you keep saying that might be. What was the root cause determined? I mean, if you state that the instructions aren't being followed, there had to be some kind of investigation to come to a root cause why the user isn't following the instruction. Can't be explained away with health state or the user has a headache. I mean, there has to be some kind of root cause. So when speaking to these patients who weren't following the instructions or the cases or the CAPA reports or whatever it was, there had to be some kind of information stated. So I think from a human factors perspective, I think it is often missed that you have to go back to understanding why these instructions aren't being followed, because what we as human factors people often see is, well, the instructions aren't being used. The instructions aren't being followed correctly. The instructions this, the instructions that. And it's kind of blaming the user when the device clearly has design flaws if people are misusing it, whether that is within the labeling or the device design, the hard design of the interface of the injector. So it is very important to convey that message to others when you're doing this, that you find the root cause why this particularly isn't being followed.
Yeah. And one aspect, if I go through the slides, you can find that these complaints are very few in numbers. Parts per million, like millions of devices are being distributed. Out of that, the complaints are in less than 100 or something kind of thing. So we cannot ignore the other patients, whether they are following instructions, they are following. With the few patients, they are not following the instruction. And again, I'm going back to the state that this is not the chronic treatment where everyday injection is being taken and they are familiar with the device. Once they are followed, they will follow continuously on weekly basis or if injection is on weekly basis or daily basis. The headache and migraine, it not occurs like that weekly or monthly. It can occur at any time. And that might be because there are several factors. It's not on a chronic thing. It's acute one. Second thing is that unintentional one. Third thing is that might have forgot because of some other reasons. But again, going back to that, developer has to consider that, and corrective action needs to be taken so that the issue with the sequence of the operation would not be there. The device has to work in both the sequences. That's the action needs to be taken.
Can I ask the same question to Satya? But before that, I will answer to the question that lady has raised. I have worked on this dye device, SureClick, for many years. No matter how you read the instructions, your intuition is to put your thumb on the button because the button doesn't move until you press it against it. So you feel like you're doing nothing by putting your thumb. And if you put the thumb on the top, even though you've read the instructions, you've understood it, that's the human behavior, you do it. And if you then press against the injection site, it doesn't happen, then you are into that loop of whoop, 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 and nothing happens and you feel like it's jammed, right? And therefore the sequencing was very, very important. So no instruction would have solved this, right? So finding out the solution that sequencing was a problem was a good thing. But my then question to you, Satya, is that we are all aware that there is something called non-use problem search. And if Sun Pharma would have done that, they would have known that this sequencing is a problem, because I wrote a paper 8 years ago and I mentioned this. So this problem has been there for 15 years since Enbrel came in SureClick dye device, right? Now my question to you is that, was there a commercial decision to get this dye device, SureClick device, and ignoring the non-use problem search, or you didn't do this non-use problem search?
Very, very interesting question. Why we selected the device where sequence needs to be followed. If you go to the RLD labeling, it needs to be followed. The sequence needs to be followed because RLD works like that. And as FDA's guidance says, that if RLD has a certain sequence, your device has to be certain sequence. So whether RLD has a complaints, I don't know whether the same similar complaints would be there for some device. So we followed the approach where whatever FDA's expectations or regulations, where whatever the instructions for RLD, similar instructions for our device. However, it's lesser number of steps, but the instructions are similar. RLD also talks the same thing, push against the injection site first and then press the activation button. And we followed the same. And that's the result, but it may not work all of the time, but we need to again consider going by the patient or considering the patient, that it may not be all of the time would be huge success, but we need to take a corrective action. And if you go with the corrective action, it's a continuous improvement, and taking the corrective action, continuously improving, it gives a lot of success, and that's the success story.
I have a question for Claire. Claire, thank you for joining us from overseas. We really appreciate that. A question for you is regarding the Advair Discus product that in the change in orientation for the Wixella product. Can you share with us what the intellectual property was that you got around by changing the orientation? Was that a design patent, or was that a trademark trade dress issue for the Discus?
I believe, Markham, that we addressed both design and trade dress in our development. However, what I would say is that the in-hub device was designed to be a platform device before it evolved into a generic to Discus, so that that design had already been in place, and that might be something that we come across quite often in generic development, and we've talked about platform devices throughout the last couple of days. So you may not always set out with the intent of targeting a specific reference product when you start on the device development journey, and that's certainly where we were with the in-hub device.
I have a question I have a question for Dr. Kwok. You mentioned the suspension products, and you mentioned the sedimentation kinetics and resuspendability is important. I just wonder whether there is a need to assess sedimentation kinetics and resuspendability in the device, and if there's a need, how that is currently done.
I think I can only speak for what I have reviewed in the past, and most of the time, the company will submit some sedimentation volume array study based on maybe the time of the volume, and then we don't really have a certain standard. And what we want to see, our purpose is to assure the physical stability over shelf life. And most of the time, it's also depend on the formulation property. Is it like I think we have a lot of talk before on whether the product is flocculated, suspension, and non-flocculated. And we have a lot of issue with analyzing just the particle size itself. I think our research, we have some research done in the past, and Nathan can probably tell you more about those research. So to go back to your question, we're talking about here, the example I have is a simple refill syringes. I don't think there's any mechanism that to beyond what the labeling say. I think the labeling would say shake well. I don't even think they would say how long but what we want to see for quality is to uniformity. So we want to have some testing done, make sure the dosage form is meet the uniformity along the line with particle size, syringeability. So we all the testing collaboratively, just not on one single item.
Sure. We developed a technology, we are using this American Square Pharmacy, that can monitor sedimentation kinetics and the resuspension in pen and the vial and the prefilled syringes without taking the drug substance out. I just wonder whether that would be of value for assessing comparability. Thank you.
Yeah, I think definitely that's a very good why we have this forum, because people can share the latest information and technology. And so now FDA know about this, so we definitely take a look on what can be done, and maybe other industry can follow. What we want to do is ensure the quality, the best quality for the patient. Thank you.
Yes, we have questions online, so we can move to those. I'll start with the first one. This one is for Kai. Will existing product-specific guidances for generics, be improved to also include device information in order to facilitate development and ensure therapeutic equivalent?
I think that's another excellent question. I think during the slide I will talk about is not just combination product, drug, and device, and also generic. So we need bioequivalence, we need quality, and then we see our age. So for the product-specific guidance per se is more focusing on the bioequivalent to the RD to demonstrate therapeutic. So this question may not be the best for me to answer because I'm on quality, the head of quality. So the head of bioequivalent may be addressed better, but we always want to encompass to make sure they're bioequivalent. I think we also have a internal, that's not this public information. We also have to, any new NDA approved, we have an internal subject matter expert triage meeting that we would discuss what are the new approval NDA and what we should develop, what do we need research for those new products coming out. So we constantly working to improve, to stay current with the technology, and in a way to be proactive instead of backward things are out there. People don't know what to do. We want to be doing what we know what to do. I know maybe Robert has something to say. Thank you.
Yeah, so just to address this, so Katharine's team is very busy updating our product-specific guidance to have consistently formatted language about drug device combination products. So if you look at the newly they're working through different dosage forms. So if you look at the newly posted product-specific guidances, you'll see the current version of the device language, which tries to say very clearly what the device constitutive parts of the product are, because that's a good guide toward your early parts of the design, about the reference product. Certainly there are certain cases where the generic can differ, and also outline some of the key factors to consider in that particular product to make sure that you recognize them. Like, for example, I'm so surprised sometimes by all the problems people have with oral dosing syringes, but so hints about things like that as well can be useful. So again, if you want to see the future direction, look at the newly posted PSGs for combination products. You'll see the new formatted information, which goes through the device constitutive parts and some of the critical attributes that you should consider during development.
Thank you for helping to answer this question.
So we have another online question for Kai. The question is claiming that the FDA has requested dose accuracy studies on prefilled syringes in the past, but there's no guidance around how to perform that test. So they were asking about why that wasn't included on your slide of functional testing for the various device types.
So I think one of my slides actually mentioned dose accuracy in there. So in one of the so again, it's combination powder. So quality, we look at the dose accuracy. Sometimes you look, this company may provide do it 10 times to show some statistical analysis to show the standard deviation very tight. But also CDLH will look at it, and they may look at it differently. And I cannot speak for them, but as far for us is we want to ensure the intended dose is going to meet the label claim. So if your syringe say administer 1 ml, 1.0, so per 697, so you can forward from 697 for quality wise, you have to meet not less than the nominal volume. So that's one thing we look at for quality. But again, CDLH will also look at that as well. And also our different PSG also mentioned you need so comparable data with the IOD. So I think we are covered. Thank you.
So we have a question also online for Satya. A couple of questions actually aiming around the change or update to a sequence, or your statement that the change or update to a sequence independent injection is a change independent of the RLD. So what the question is, if a generic organization can change the injection device post-market from a sequential injection system to a sequence independent, then assuming the same patient population and use environment, can a generic company develop a 2-step injector when the current RLD is a 3-step injector? It seems like this is an opportunity to, this might open up a lot of opportunities. So the question is also asking for input from the FDA on this.
Yeah, it's again good question. We are also thinking on that line because if you see the RLD, which has several operating steps, now those are reduced with sumatriptan, Sun Pharma's device, it's major operating to 3 steps. Now again, can we go further? So there are 2 aspects. One aspect is the regulatory guidance that for comparative user assessment, that is one thing. Second thing is ISO standard. ISO standard talks about minimum number of steps before successful injection. And as per ISO 11608 part 5, there should be minimum 2 steps before any successful injection. So the platform, which if we propose as a 2-step platform, it will definitely fit into the ISO 11608 part 5. However, if you do the comparative assessment and OCD people are here, they can also conclude on that whether it's a minor design difference or major design difference or other design difference. For that, again, the comparative use human factor study and all those things would be applicable. So in my opinion, it's a personal opinion that will definitely fit, because going forward, if you think a continuous improvement, reducing down the efforts to the patient and also reducing down the complaints to the negligible level, it would be a good thing to go with the 2-step against the 3 steps. So that's my personal opinion.
I just had a brief comment I wanted to follow on from what Rob Leinberger said about the PSGs. For those who are interested and want to learn more about how we're developing device-related language for product-specific guidance, there's a 3-hour webinar that's being offered on the afternoon of April 25th, which I believe is a Thursday. And one of the members of the device evaluation team will be presenting on that. So please go to the SBIA website and look for that if you're interested.
Another question for Satya. The Sun product seems to be simplified drug device combination product compared to the RLD product. However, during the design phase, did Sun consider sustainability and the potential to design a reusable or multi-use, multi-dose product? And if so, were there any limitations?
Yes, again, it's a good question. If you compare RLD with Sun's device, obviously there are certain advantages with Sun device, and there are certain advantages with the RLD as well, because RLD has a pen or auto-injector which is reusable. However, if cost perspective, if you say the cost perspective, cost per injection, RLD pen is reusable, it can be used multiple times, it will just need a 2 cartridge pack or refill so that the injection can be completed. However, again, going in the disease states or going to the indications, if you think that the indication is a migraine or indication is a cluster headache, the headache of carrying so many components with the person, that also becomes a big headache. It's a big pack carrying to them, or it's not for all of the patient, but some of the patient, they think that can we have the portable format? Can we have the single dose disposable format so that injection can be taken, a couple of injections, and the disease or the treatment can be done. So we need to consider both the aspects, whether you are offering some kind of additional advantage to the patient in terms of usability, efforts, and having the successful injection, or whether your objective is to reduce the cost by introducing the reusable device so that the cost per injection will go down. So it's a business decision or company strategy to decide on what aspects. And third, or may or may not be important factor, what exactly our marketing teams and all those things think that's in particular domain, because the domain is flooded with several options. Like there is a prefilled syringe, there is an auto-injector, there is a reusable auto-injector, there is a nasal spray. So this domain is quite flooded. So it's totally depend on considering several aspects of the business.
Another question to follow up on this suspension. So we assessed this intra-batch variability of a suspension product. It's a vaccine presented in vials and in pre-filled syringes. So we measured vial to vial or syringe to syringe variability. And we observed a larger intra-batch variability with the syringe presentation. I just want to ask industry colleagues here, whether filling syringes is more challenging than filling vials if there is a suspension. Whether that's generally true and that's not true, or it's our observation, there's larger variability with the syringe presentation.
So I mean, this interest, like he was saying, it can be answered by industry and also FDA. I think FDA maybe in terms of its the drug product consistency, right? So we want to ensure the drug product consistency, that's number one. And secondly, I think in my slide, I mentioned the risk assessment. So if you consider the high risk, you should provide data and justification to mitigate the risk from high to low. If you have see differences in your work, then you may find out, you may want to see why you're seeing different data. So I think that may be more suitable for people from industry when they do filling suspension in a vial in the syringe.
To answer your question, so first, for any device, like either it's a prefilled syringe or auto-injector or pen injector, whatever, the primary container is the important aspect. So if you have a suspension product which is filled in the syringe, and what other option is filled in the vial. So ultimately, the suspension product which is filled in the vial would be extracted into a syringe and then it would be delivered. Now, if you are giving the ready to use, which is directly injected to the patient, so in that case, there are a lot of things needs to be considered. The first things what Kaik was saying is that a lot of extractable, leachables and all those things are there. But apart from that, in terms of functional performance, whether the break loose glide force is within the ISO limits, And ISO has a latest ISO standard 2022 where limits are specified. And those are basically driven by the internal diameter of the PFS and the thickness of the PFS and also the material of the PFS, if it is a plastic or it is a glass or any SiO2 material. So all those aspects are very important before considering your primary container, either it's a vial or two-field syringe. So for suspension products, mostly the viscosity or density, which is viscosity is basically more than the solution product. Solution is like water-like solution. Viscosity is almost equivalent to water. So all of those aspects needs to be considered with both the options, and then further development can be carried out.
Maybe I want to add that because I think we have some internal study done on the shear itself, the syringe. Maybe you have a gliding force and break loose force. They may impact on your formulation. I think we have non-flocculated and flocculated suspension that can have a different impact on the drug product of property like particle size, right?
So my question is to both Satya and I guess to Claire as well. So Satya, your device obviously is so very different than RLD, but I do understand, I mean, the decisions for that device selection were done probably a lot earlier and even before probably the guidance came in. And same way, maybe Claire, I think you said that your HF study that you did was basically the typical new drug HF study that we do with n equal to 15 for different user groups. So my question is, if you had to come at the same crossroads again in the current regulatory landscape of the CUHF, and we already know, or you already shown us the data that actually your device is fairly good, fairly easy, and you have claimed that it is actually the gold standard across different geographies. But in the current regulatory landscape that we have, will you make the same decision to simplify the device use? And maybe to a certain extent, clear that, I mean, your device is not that different, but we all know the complexities with the adware. And will we basically, is this a question of, I mean, would you make the same decisions when you are faced with the challenges in the current regulatory guidances and framework that we currently have?
Yeah, Claire, I will answer first. Yeah, it's a good question again. So decision, again, the decision had several aspects. It's not just the decision based on one particular aspect. There are several aspects. As I told in one of the slide, that the first is identify the unmet clinical need. So unmet clinical need is definitely first gets identified, and unmet clinical need has several aspects. It's not related just to the particular factor like whether patient has several steps to get the successful injection. I think there are other factors we discussed. Cost is there. And whether you are putting that into the market, what exactly other devices into the market, whether those are in vials, ampoules, or prefilled syringes. So if you want to take a decision on that particular direction, decision will be only made basis the ecosystem, whether that type of ecosystem, whether available at your manufacturing site or not. The ecosystem which shown in one of the slides is several sciences and technologies coming into the picture. So drug device combination product to develop from the beginning. So first you have to consider the last goal of your drug device combination product, and then the reverse way you can carry. You will need a consultant, you will need an expertise, you will need the machine supplier, you will need the device supplier, component supplier, platform technology is established. So several things comes into picture, and then only the decision would be made. And if everything is established, so it's a huge infrastructure. If everything is established, then definitely it will go to the next level. And as a part of continuous improvement, you will keep improving on the device with respect to basis on the corrective actions, basis on the market complaints, and basis on the patient's needs. That's the whole story of the device.
So from my point of view, if I were at the same crossroads but facing the comparative analysis guidance with the in-hub device, what I'd know straight away is that my device isn't dissimilar to the RLD. There is one other design difference, and that I would know from my known use research that there are issues with the reference product from a usability point of view that are overcome by subtleties in that are minor differences in the in-hub device, and that I would know from market data on the Wixella in-hub that we've got a very usable device that would hopefully support that other design difference. So I think if I were at this crossroads, then I would be making the same decision again and moving forward and using the comparative analysis approach, but hoping that the agency would accept the wealth of data that I have, both risk-based assessments and post-market data on the existing device, and that I wouldn't be driven down the route of a statistical comparative use study. Thanks.
So before we lose Claire online, I wanted to ask a question to any and all of the human factors experts that we have at the conference right now. And I've been stewing about this since participating in topic 2 this morning. I was wondering, is there a body of data out there that suggests what patients think about using pre-filled syringes versus auto injectors? I'm going to say auto injectors because multi-dose pen injectors, I think many of them share a lot of features with pre-filled syringes. So they're sort of like fancy pre-filled syringes. But from the point of view of controlling the injection process, I was wondering if there's any data out there about what patients prefer. Certainly patients have physical limitations. There may be different preferences, but is there a body of data out there on that?
It's not public, but we have done a lot of projects where you're looking at a drug and someone is trying to decide, do we want to have both a prefilled syringe and an auto injector available to the public? Do we want to just pick one, right? And there's some benefits to having redundancy for supplies, et cetera. And when we've looked at hundreds of patients and had these conversations, there's about 10% that like the prefilled syringe because they like the control. They like to slowly push, or they have certain feelings about the plunger interaction. And then there's a much larger population that prefers the auto injector. You don't see the needle usually. And a lot of the auto injectors now are buttonless. There's a lot of movement in the buttonless market. So the thing about the old Enbrel SureClick and the updated one is that was the situation where they had the button, so they felt like they did have control. So it was sort of a compromise between the two designs. But there is a small population that just loves a prefilled syringe. So far apart. Very far apart.
From my experience, it's kind of similar with the percentages on the studies, but I don't focus so much on the percentages of the preferences. I focus more on why they prefer each. And the prefilled syringe it's not a preferred form or shape or any kind of even attractiveness on the design, the convenience. And then the biggest thing that I usually see is the needle safety. So the retraction of the needle visibility, the needle length, the needle thickness, the needle, anything and everything that involves the needle is the swinging factor on the preference usually, because there are prefilled syringes where it's not that big of a deal. It's not as cumbersome as some of the designs that are out there. There are some prefilled syringes that just have very unfortunate designs where reverse injection happened quite a few times in testing. And so there's the design aspect to how each one looks. And then there's the needle. That's as long as it's retractable, as long as it's not visible, as long as it's automatic, they don't really care either way. So that's the biggest swing factor from my experience.
Thank you very much. Anybody else who wants to weigh in on that before we go back to topic closer to the symposium? It's okay.
Thank you. I have a follow-up question for the HF experts in the room, and that is whether we see any trends around that changing. So like historically, did they prefer one and the other, and are they shifting, or is that pretty much staying the same year over year? For the preference of PFS versus AI, yeah.
Sorry, I'm more involved in auto injectors lately because that is becoming the norm. The needle safety is now an actual thing, so it's no longer a choice. And the retraction of the needle is kind of almost guaranteed now, at least the manufacturers who do think patient-centric kind of move in that direction. I would say that from a preference point, you have to, like, I know this sounds like really kind of basic, but the less we use pre-filled syringe, the less I can determine whether it's a preference anymore. You know, so like if I'm only doing auto injectors because they're becoming the norm, then the pre-filled is kind of a question for the, let's say, older devices. And
Sure.
in that, I think it's more of a question like the manufacturers that still have pre-filled syringes for whatever reason, whether it's a product they don't want to move on to an auto injector or it's not suitable for an auto injector. There is even considerations from some of them to move to these because of the needle safety kind of point and the retraction of the needle. Even as a patient myself, if I don't use anything anymore where I have to deal with a needle. So that's kind of that's what I was saying earlier. I don't know if you agree, but anytime there's a needle exposure or a needle kind of situation where they have to think more because of the needle, that's kind of how you make your decision, I think.
So I agree very much with the trends and the patterns that both of my HF expert colleagues here have shared. Definitely the trend and the majority of patients seem to prefer AIs for all of these reasons. Just something to add for consideration. Sometimes we do hear that patients do prefer or are willing to accept some of the complications that come with PFSs because they are smaller, they appear smaller, they appear to take up less space. And so that means you can fit more of them in a Sharps container, for example. And so you don't have to pay the expense of dropping it off, or it's more convenient, or you don't have to buy another one. And speaking to the sustainability topic that we talked about earlier, we hear more and more comments now from participants saying like, wow, this was great, but oh my goodness, so much plastic, so much waste. I wish there was a way we could have the best of both worlds. So I don't know that these considerations will ever outweigh things like fear of needles and the need for needle safety mechanisms and the fewer number of user interactions AIs require. But we're starting to see some more nuanced opinions about the differences between the two different platforms, particularly as patients are starting to perhaps have experience with both and can see that, you know, there are benefits and drawbacks.
One thing to add, we keep saying patient, and they are the most important user, but there are organizations that will not use anything that doesn't have certain standards, like hospitals. There are certain doctors' offices have policies that they do not want to use anything that has any kind of chance for needle exposure. So they will refuse to use certain devices. So there are actually devices that have different versions for exactly that reason, because certain hospital systems or healthcare systems won't use them. That's maybe consideration when you think about distribution.
Presenting for topic 1, topic 2, topic 3, and topic 4, could you please come up to the podium as we prepare to provide the summary for Symposium 3? Everybody, we're going to go ahead and get started with the summary for Symposium 3. I'm not too worried about the folks who aren't in the room because they did this hands-on. This is mostly for all of you online to hear a little bit about what happened during Symposium 3 at the end of day 1 and the very beginning of day 2 of this workshop. So again, Symposium 3 was setting the course for the generic drug device combination product future. And clearly, this is not working. Pardon me while I figure out where my cursor is. Do you have it? Thanks. So the purpose and goals of Symposium 3, you may remember this slide from yesterday, was to share challenges in pursuit of a better future state, to share ideas and possible paths forward to inform further discussion, work, and research in the area. And just a reminder that we weren't going to come out of this workshop with newly developed FDA policy. The picture on the right, I chose because it's really important to see the forest through the trees. And I once again could you go to the next slide for me, please? This doesn't seem to be. It's not advancing. No. Just as a reminder, we had 4 topics, and these 4 topics.
That one's better. Oh, you can use the green button.
The 4 topics were running
Thank you.
concurrently. So we had 4 different spaces, and each of these topics ran twice, once yesterday and once this morning. So before I turn this over to our facilitators who are reporting out today, I just want to say thank you to our facilitators and our participants. Everybody here made a really essential contribution. So, wow, you guys did amazing teamwork. There were very lively discussions. I think the mission or the concept that was set out and what we wanted to accomplish was achieved. But what happens next? We're not done. So this is just a reminder to everybody, whether you are online or whether you are in the room, if you have an interest in participating in the committee that we plan to stand up through the Center for Research in Complex Generics, please do reach out to us. You should have some contact information for CRCG. I'm happy to share my email, but I have to figure out how to do that because I didn't put it in the slides. But we would love to have you involved. We would love to have representation from FDA, from industry, from human factors consultants, and from any other area of expertise, that plays in this space and can really provide a valuable perspective. So there may be opportunities. Please reach out if you're interested. I also wanted to acknowledge that members of my review team were acting as note takers in each of these sessions, and they worked really hard to take notes during the sessions and to compile them and send them off to the co-facilitators. They put in a lot of time yesterday, today, and I wanted to just send an international thank you to them for all their work. And now I'd like to turn this over to Betsy Ballard, who is going to summarize what happened in the topic 1 breakout working sessions.
Okay, so I want to thank Mary Beth Pravada, who you all met yesterday when she did a presentation. She is on her way to the airport, so she couldn't join us. But I also want to give a shout out to Lee Leichter, who, although he couldn't be here in person and participate, he was instrumental in helping us develop the questions that we wanted to ask the audience. So we started with this, how do you describe design differences? Because that's the starting point for when you're going to determine something is minor or major, other. So tongue in cheek, but one of the first responses was, well, hire a design firm. Because all along the way, you're going to have critical task decisions that are going to vary between interpreters. So one of the suggestions was a simultaneously independent risk analysis and task-based analysis. And you need to, and justifying the differences is crucial throughout the whole process. Not only justifying, but how they occurred and why they occurred and why you think that, you've classified them the way you have. The recommendation was to develop a set of design attributes starting based on the RLD. So start with the RLD, figure out what the design attributes are for the RLD, and then use that as you go through your design process. Also important was brought up that you need to identify those parts or those issues that cannot be innovated on because of things like patent issues and et cetera. You need to develop various versions of the design, evaluate each of those, and use like a decision matrix to sort of help you select which one you're going to go forward with in your design. Certainly formative comparative, not CUHF, but formative comparative human factor studies are important as you do your design development. And they said, and one of the things that they recommended, which is define the critical task, use the URA. One of the companies said, well, we use off-the-shelf device components. So, these things are already there and we can't really change them or modify them. Well, what do you do there? And one of the other suggestions that came up was having two different people assigned to evaluating the device and then comparing their answers to see where they differ and use that as a basis for moving forward. So some of the common problems that they were identifying in describing design differences is it's a subjective assessment. And how do we standardize it? How do we make it more objective? It's not a simple process. We all know that. And how do you define the critical tasks from the RLD? The next question that we asked was, how do you determine if something you're looking at is a minor difference or an other difference? And the cricket is there because we basically got silence and we could hear the crickets talking. Clearly that told us that is an area that it's still a challenge and that needs to be addressed. One of the common issues that we relating to that topic were how do you tie a design attribute to a task? And everybody found that to be particularly challenging. How do you define a critical task was another issue that came up several times. Is everything minor, or I've had some people from industry say, well, every task is critical. If you can't open the package, you can't deliver the device, it's a critical task. So that was one of the other issues that was brought up is how do you determine what's truly critical? And then uncertainty around the categorizations. So some of the ideas that they came to was that we need to have a standardization on how the different categories are assigned and also how they're performed. It would be nice to have a publicly available reference database that would include things such as the context of use, who is the user population, the environment of use, and also any comorbidities or impairments. Are you dealing with a population that has rheumatoid arthritis and or somebody with a neuromuscular disease who has fine motor coordination issues? And having a publicly available database that could be referenced might be helpful. Recommend incorporating the URA into our design comparisons. Would like to see examples of best practices published so that it's available for industry to look at. They suggested developing a database of RLDs and the specific context within them that can be used to create a matrix system that uses, some of the FDA data that we have. And it could be done in a way that it's redacted so that you can't determine which company or what information, where it came from. They'd like to have a better definition of what are the determinants that we use to determine that a difference is minor and versus other, and publish that information. What criteria can we rely on? How is that decision going to be made? They would also appreciate examples of how other design differences, and you saw that this afternoon, have been approved and how they were justified. So you saw some examples of that this afternoon. They'd like to see more of that. And finally, the thing that they think needs a lot of work is how do you develop a tool to conduct these design analyses? And the presentation that Mary Beth and Megan did yesterday sort of addresses that. It was the first step or first look at how do you design? What tool can you develop to allow sort of a standardization across industry and the FDA when they evaluate these types of differences between devices? And that's, I think, all we have to say. So I will turn it over to the next presenter.
Okay, we're gonna have to do it this way because I can't see the podium.
Yeah, that was the problem Katharine was
Okay.
having.
That's cool. That's fine. All right. Well, let me go back. So in case some of you weren't in topic 2 workshop, even though I feel like everybody at one point was, we discussed when might other design differences be justified without a CUHF study. So for this, we kind of started off the workshop by asking and kind of serving the room why participants were there and what their drivers were for attending the session and what they were most interested in learning. Some of the biggest things probably was probably basic, common thinking is they wanted to know that, you know, they're doing the study correctly. They wanted to know, some were interested in learning what is changing regarding DDCPs, and some were interested in learning and sharing experiences from others. But some of the biggest things probably that came up were learning about other differences. What is other difference, right? How to approach it and how to test it. Some also spoke about simply increasing their confidence of doing something other than CUHF, and also how to arrive at other approaches. And the parameters around CUHF's cost and time were a big thing, as well as encountering these design differences and then understand the peers' challenges across the field with the similar kind of issues that people were talking about. And then simply just align and find consensus also in language being used when talking about these things, because that seems to also be a little bit of a challenge when people use different terminology for the same thing. And then also we asked, why would they want to seek alternatives for a CUHF study? One of the biggest things, which of course me as a human factors person does not like, is cost and time, because that has nothing to do with the actual thing, but okay. But to meet customer timelines and requests when, in this particular case, doing off-the-shelf device manufacturers that have to meet deadlines for pharma companies, or again, to potentially save time and cost, and to understand why CUHF is needed when alternative data is available, or simply to commercialize faster or at all. So this also came up, the determination whether you would actually even move forward with the project. Okay, so then to imagine we divided the room into groups and we all had people do group activities. And so for that, we simply provided kind of the starting point of like what to consider, right? When you walk into it, first comes first, of course, you have to kind of agree that it is an other design difference. And then kind of move from there. So when you ask yourself the questions, what is another design difference, right? Where do you go? From what do you start? Typically, is the product being used in emergency use? Is it a chronic use, right? So is there an urgency when you're using it, or do you have time? And the criticality goes down when it comes to the time factor. Who are the users, and where would the device be used? What is the use environment, right? Regarding risks, also, did the product or the drug constituent part have a narrow therapeutic index? What are the potential use errors for this difference, and how could they possibly be mitigated prior to it? So then when you think about those contextual questions, those context questions, how to derive there, then when you get to that decision, then what type of data, what type of information may support this type of difference? And then how would you actually apply this information in this data? Why do you think it is even scientifically supportable? Is it even scientifically supportable? And would this apply to all use scenarios and all user groups that are exposed or intended to be the intended users? For example, this goes back to like the emergency versus the chronic use, or even adult versus pediatric populations. And then, of course, are there other considerations that we should account for? So I feel like you can hear me breathe, but if I step just 1 centimeter back, you can't hear me anymore. So, okay. All right. So as far as summarizing, let's just say there were a lot of examples mentioned and we couldn't necessarily have all of them worked on, but someone mentioned resetting button. Proposed generic does not have a reset button, and apparently the RLD had. Then the extension of dose button. So this was in relation to dialing the dose button out. So that would kind of change the, not necessarily the shape, but the length of the device. The number of activation use steps going from 2 to 3, for example, different color coding of graduation marks, or even having graduation marks on one and having less or more or even none on the other. Then going from auto injector to PFS, then pen injector, specifically moving from pull push versus push or slide button. Then pen injector change steps to dial dose. So there would be like an additional step in between to actually select the dose, dial the dose. And then auto injectors cap versus no cap. This was a popular one. And then pen injector, different locking mechanisms to avoid accidental injection. So just, you know, mystery clue here, the red ones were the ones we worked on. So when then working through the groups, let me go back so not everybody starts reading. So when then working through the groups, the one thing that before we even started writing anything down kind of came and surfaced was that we're all going to start from a risk point, right? So everybody kind of had the consensus that you start off from what is the risk? What is it, an other design difference? And then what is the risk, right? So one of the biggest things also is like context is important. Are any of the examples mentioned could have been other design differences? Like this is the common question, like, is it there? Then the use-related risk should be the key driver in strategy selection for alternative approach. So when you then select and agree that it is an other design difference, like the use-related risk analysis or whatever, URRA or UFMEA, should be the key driver in your strategy selection of the alternative approach, right? And then moving on from that, considering multiple types and sources of data or information to support other. So this was one of the biggest things that kind of hammered home with, I think, everybody kind of who facilitated the workshop. It is very important to also provide a comprehensive and cohesive story for the FDA to follow your reasoning for classifying a difference as other and the corresponding data provision with it, right? So this is one that maybe just me as a human factors person is going to harp a little bit on, but you can't just say it is other. Say we did our use-related risk analysis and here's the report. Go figure, right? That's not, there's no connection to it, right? You have to be able to, we always say justify, but you should be able to tell a comprehensive story, a cohesive story that follows your reasoning, how you derive there. And just a little tip, I always say this, pretend that the person who's reading has never even opened a science book, right? Nothing. They have never done this, right? They need to understand your reasoning in connection of a story. Next, one thing that came up interesting was simply doing a validation study. Can a validation study be used? A 2-arm. So summative and with 2 arms where you have the current existing users within it. And then in some cases, can a summative plus a residual risk analysis, could that suffice? And then also, depending on the results of the summative, the next steps may include redesign of the user interface or possibly collect additional data, which is then when you move into a CUHF study, actually. Then also, there was some interest in exploring how clinical data, real-world data, and/or adverse event reporting could be used to justify another design difference. And then the last one, which I don't want to go too much into, I don't understand the legalities around it too much, but can you rely on someone's data or other data out there? And that's why that's kind of underneath, like, would that present legal challenges and or issues? Not a lawyer, I can't answer that, but that came up for why that may not be an option. That's kind of it. So, the next slide.
Next one. Next, in about 3 weeks. All of the slides from the workshop will be online. And so the additional information that's on the slides, you can certainly read and get some additional details about that topic.
All right, thanks. First, we sort of retitled ours, or at least sort of liberally changed the focus. We did cover what it was, sort of what the original title was, but we did sort of modify just a little bit. Special thanks to Tom Guise, Tim Briggs, and Somesh Chattopadhyay from DB8 for their participation. So we're just skipping through. We gave an overview, I should say. We did give an overview of qualitative human factor study design. We contrasted that with comparative use human factor study design, just to sort of orient people to kind of what things we were considering in this discussion. So those slides will be available. We had really 3 topic areas. The first was this non-inferiority CUHF design. What are the challenges? What are some ways that we might be able to use to address those challenges? The topics that came up, setting the margin. That was the largest theme, as you can imagine. So there was discussion about use of available data, either in the marketplace or your own data, taking a risk-based approach, exploring the assumptions, like could you have could you assume for calculation purposes, calculation of the margin, that your RLD has an error rate of 0, for example? Could you do a pilot study to try and narrow down some of those risks of error? So the last one I thought was interesting, and actually this kind of came up on both days from independent groups. Could you have fixed margins, right, based on risk? And we just sort of use the term buckets. So the idea is that different buckets might be based on risk. So chronic use medication, emergency use medication, narrow therapeutic index medications, and could we really just establish sort of here's where the lines might be, right, for margins to make those a little bit easier to identify. Another topic that came up was just clarifying the error definitions. That could be study specific. It could include, and the question was, could it include learning situations? Could it include continuous outcomes as opposed to binary outcomes? So an example might be the magnitude of a dose error that's occurring in the study as opposed to just straight up success or failure. And so those are some of the things that we discussed in terms of non-inferiority CUHF design. Topic area 2 was also sort of very productive and may reflect some of what was said in session 2. We wanted to sort of reiterate that we're going to talk about qualitative human factors design, but that the goal is still to demonstrate substitutability of the proposed generic. And so what could you do potentially to bridge that from what would be a sort of a standard, quote unquote, standard HF design? So some of the things that came up, you could use experienced RLD users and naive users. You could have a large enough, so you determine your sample size, much like we do in HF studies. Is the study sample size large enough to detect the errors that you might expect to see? You would conduct root cause analyses, some things like, why are these errors occurring? Is there any indication that there's a negative transfer of learning between the reference product and the proposed product? Is there anything unique happening, right? Are there any unique use errors between the RLD and the proposed generic that might indicate substitutability might be actually a problem? Are any of the root causes linked to differences? So these other design differences. And the goal would be then to demonstrate that there's a low risk of a difference in clinical effect and safety profile. There was a question mark about whether that type of a study would still need to be sort of comparative or really kind of crossover design. In other words, I have an RLD user that uses the reference product, and then in a separate scenario uses the proposed product and vice versa. But we didn't really dig into that too much. The thing that I think is important that kind of came out sort of at the end of that was, number one, could be feasible. But number two, that there may be this sort of underlying idea that you might have to be using the HFE process throughout your development, right? Much like you would under an NDA or BLA. I wouldn't want to do this study without having any information about whether I'll be successful with the product I'm proposing. So topic area 3 was really an all-comers type of category. So what other ideas do we have and studies that we could do to demonstrate substitutability of a proposed generic? We had a couple of seed ideas, and I'm going to work from the bottom. There was a question about Bayesian approaches. There was a brief discussion about that, but really kind of landed at there may be similar challenges to the existing non-inferiority model. So you still have to determine an informative prior. You still need to determine D, and you sort of get back to the same challenge of how you might do that. And then there was a brief discussion on modeling as well, but thought that the modeling itself is a very complicated process, and maybe throwing in comparative use type of questions into that modeling might be very challenging. But the two that we spent more time on were quantitative non-inferiority design with fixed assumptions, and I think that came up in my slide on the non-inferiority design as well. Can I just make assumptions based on risk and use those as inputs and reach agreement on that, and sort of everybody knows where that is. But then there was also a potential for hybrid qualitative quantitative design. So you might calculate your errors. You might have your errors looking at the magnitude of dose difference, and I might use that with whatever existing clinical data, right, to determine, well, what's the clinical impact really? What would I expect from that? And then really tied into that is demonstrating that that any use error that you saw would not lead to a clinically meaningful difference. And that was the topic. Okay. Who's up next?
So for Symposium 3, topic 4 was building a more informed and flexible comparative user interface assessment landscape. Basically, this topic is related to the futuristic approach. It's not the current, with respect to the current challenges and future or proposed actions. So there could be ideas on the futuristic approach. And we have 2 fantastic sessions yesterday and today morning. And a lot of ideas came out of those 2 sessions. We have briefed those ideas or summarized those ideas in terms of the comments and discussions. The first thing, which is related to the current state and challenges, what are the comments on the participants? And we also had the meaningful discussion with all the members who were participating. So basically, the comments were related to the challenges or current state of the with respect to the FDA as well as with respect to the industry. What exactly the current state is like. FDA is with limited by regulation. FDA is limited by regulation and the Supreme Court, and also not with the clear guidance. That could be the current state or challenge. New drug industry is biggest lobbying group in US. That's the comment. Policy documents are not updated, or they are outdated. FDA not meeting expectations on labeling. DDCPs are difficult to copy because of patents, and then difficult to figure out critical differences, litigations on RLDs, artificial intelligence role in using the current database in an unbiased way, then problem with Orange Book, industry unlikely to share data, and in comparative human factor study, challenges related to the sample size, determination of non-inferiority margin, and generating industry struggling to demonstrate substitutability. So those are the current states, and we had a very interesting discussion on whether the smart devices creates barriers to generics, or what would it look like to grant more flexibility? Would the FDA be more explicit on what type of flexibility might look like? What are the ways what would loosen up? And in measuring these things in post-marketing setting, what would be the flexibility look like? If FDA could have Congress change something tomorrow, what would that be? There is a perception that CUHF studies are the end all be all in. If you are thinking about the post-marketing studies and how to get generics on the market, like generics getting pulled off a couple of years later because they do not work. So we had discussion on that, and how should we consider when patients cannot afford the product, so there is a need for generic. So discussions were happened around that. This was the session 1. In the session 2 also, we had the comments, and also discussion happened on various topics. Comments were related to the syringe of different designs can lead to the medication errors, better access to drugs that are off exclusivity and are DDCPs, existing patent landscape and problems that affect access to generics. Insurance companies or payers instead of FTC are taking up claims related issues with DDCPs. In vitro testing is an evolving process, but there is a still space for research and development and guidance for implants and intravaginal rings and microneedles and other systems in the future. So there is no prescriptive guidance for PFS compatibility with the reusable auto-injector that are reused, but the PFS is replicated by the patient for each use, example, Capasen. So PFS is replaced by the patient. So current standards are very high level, and more specific technical consideration guidance will be helpful. Current CDRH regulations are broad and not very specific. So discussion were happened on, there is a current ongoing work on categorization of various inhalation products in CDR. CDRH has guidance for nebulizer and spacers for general inhalation. A lot of inputs given by Markham as well with respect to the FDA perspective, like CDR general control for a nasal spray device, EDR provide design controls when system delivery of drug is desired, and more controls are needed. So discussion on class 1, class 2, and class 3 devices, special controls, downgrading and upgrading devices. We also had discussion on definition for ocular syringes, on-body injection systems. Those were developed in CDRS recently. So similar definitions will be helpful for all types of devices. So now the next thing is desired future step. What the ideas for desired future step? From the session 1, we got a lot of ideas. We listed out those ideas. So few of them are also, and we have summarized all of those in this particular slide. So from session 1, ideas were like early conclusion from FDA. In other words, a quick review on generic substitutability. Substitutability software application in public domain, where the access would be given to industries as well as the same access for FDA. Legislation need for patents, use of standards for regulation of new and generic drugs, mathematical application for demonstrating substitutability driven by data science and artificial intelligence, risk to environment of risk benefit analysis for approval of generics, balance of risk of differences and risk of not approving, public investment by Congress, ability to leverage prior experience is a key. Then we also had some ideas on machine learning. So machine learning to validate legal claims and patents, machine learning to compile research, assess if differences are statistically significant in the context of the target user demographic. So compile relevant research and data, then idea on the cooperation and collaboration to address differences as multiple companies use the same platform. For example, the industry perspective, the generic industry, there are several generic industries. They are using the same platform to demonstrate the generic substitutability against the RLD. So RLD is the same, and generic industry is also having the same platform. So why the multiple comparative use human factor studies required in that case? So can FDA come out with the some kind of collaboration between all of them and have only single comparative use human factor study to generic susceptibility. That kind of the discussion. We also had the discussion on generic industry cooperates for REMS. They cooperate with each other and come up with the consortium to monitor all generic drugs out there on AEs and prior authorization. But again, can we do that for this so the generic companies are not seen as a colluding or some kind of not a negative thinking on that? So that's the discussion. Can there be a DMF for the pain? Can the safety assurance case method be used? Include AI tools for post-marketing surveillance. Can we use the AI tools? Discussions happen on that topic. Now the ideas generated for desired future state and discussion for session 2. The ideas is like identify current data that exists to support one device is equivalent to another. And industry standards for markings would be helpful. Take advantage of the pre-NDA program, early interaction, GADU more space for interaction, interest in standardization in standards and guidance specific to DDCPs that include device evaluation. Specification must be clear on label. Most common design changes, two-step approach, what would be the idea? Clarify on study designs for the CUHF study approach. No CUHF study and only comparative assessment. What would be the situation for on that particular? So CUHF study would not be required, but assessment will be done in vitro comparative kind of studies. Multiple strength, as we discussed, of the same DDCP, consider a single CUHF study at least for the same device model, like fixed versus variable pain. Like in case of RLD, there are multiple devices because based on the dosing regimen. Can we consider the only CUHF, single CUHF study to demonstrate the generic susceptibility? So all other remaining variants can be also considered as a substitutable against the RLDs. So increase period of exclusivity for first to file DDCP generics because what discussion was that DDCP is a very complex thing. So a lot of investment, lot of challenges are there. So once that the generic industry gets the first to file status, can we have the exclusivity instead of 180 days? Can we have 1 year or more than like that? So that was the discussion. So, but again, it's a congressional decision with justification for a public health need. We had a discussion on several topics, like what would be required for a while to PFS, full HF validation study would be required, or will it meet ANDA requirements, or 505BT is the only pathway? So glass PFS, generic is trying to be better with integrated needle safety system. What is the activation force? No reference because in ISO standard, the specification limit for activation force is not there. So what would be the specification? Verified and validated, how to validate when the RLD has no safety system, how to validate them. Some allowable changes for the generic compared to RLD in terms of improved patient safety, develop a standard as needle stick prevention is also important. RLD is withdrawn. How to consider allowing this? So how consider the allowing differences because RLD is already withdrawn. So can we consider the differences which are allowable? When multiple generic companies are trying to bring similar platform as we discussed in last slide, so can we have the one CUHF study? When both the RLD and test meet ISO standard, then whether the comparative assessment is required for RLD versus generic because both needs to meet the ISO standards. All those were a topic for discussion. So after that, we had certain discussions and ideas for current resources and opportunities and also other needed data on resources. So like FDA must be with huge data on several types of devices from innovator and generics. Data from FDA, generic industry and research institute can be utilized to build a streamlined framework for demonstrating generic susceptibility. Resources at FDA, academics, and generic industry can collaborate together for research opportunity to generate the data. If data is not available, can we generate the data with collaborative approach? And what other data needed or what other resources required, like funding from FDA or generic industry for joint collaboration on research topic. There could be a couple of topics on which we can have a collaboration. ISO standards, not prescriptive and allows for flexibility. FDA can be more prescriptive and provide technical details more than ISO. So it is always good to reach to FDA. That's what we discussed that instead of reaching to ISO standards. So it's easy to reach to FDA. Support from FDA and ISO organization for more clarity on standards. Can FDA lead that to get in touch with the ISO organization for more clarity on standards? That was the needed data or resources part. Set up a standards for general use for specific device categories. So where FDA may or maybe additional other needed data or resources would be required to set up the standards for general use. So with that, I would thanks to all participants and all facilitators. Thank you all.
Thank you. This really brings us to the end of our workshop. And I'd like to invite Markham Luke up to share a few thoughts after participating for the last 2 days. And thank you to everybody who helped prepare the summary.
So today is Friday, and that means you're fried, right? After all this, that's what Kate said. This is the last talk before you all head out through the doors to the weekend. So I'm going to try to keep this short, but before I go into like a summary and the future vision, I wanted to make sure we thank all the organizers and the participants. So I know that both Anna and Jim had left already, but we can give them a applause for running all the CRCG symposiums for industry and for FDA. This is a public-private partnership type of thing where we can share ideas and have workshops and conversations around how to move forward in the generic drug development space, including what the best ways to put our energy and our resources are into these developments. So this really a nice space. And from the FDA side, we have Sam Ronnie, who's interacting with those folks. And this is all due to a vision from Rob Leinberger from the Office of Research and Standards. So I just want to say OGD has visionary, supportive management and staff to make these things a reality. I wanted to thank Kate here for putting a lot of hard work and thinking and hours of deliberation and wringing hands and tearing papers and stuff like that to get this thing underway. Kate, thank you for putting your team and I want to thank Team D from the division who have not just been here in person taking notes, but also helping with the planning and collaborating to get this underway. And then the organizing group, which we just had to photograph, you all did a fantastic job meeting regularly to see how to organize this and tell a story. And so you guys have hopefully appreciated all the participants, including those who've left the room here, but a lot of you are still online, can see that this workshop journey that we've had for the last 2 days tells a story. Like it's what is the current state, where would we like to be, and what are possible ways to get there. And so these are things that we're mindful of, and this is, as we said when we began this journey for this last 2 days, this is not the end of the story. This is we're just beginning the discussion. This is and also we've clarified some other pieces from the first set of the workshop from last year. We had a 2-day workshop, and so we're building on what we learned from that workshop and adding to it from this workshop. And we anticipate that there'll be future discussions as well in the context of this particular product area. Industry recognizes this product area has a lot of challenges and opportunities. So we're working together with industry who've advanced in our GDUFA commitment letters that this is an important area for FDA to work forward to. And we'll have additional discussions at our GDUFA research workshop, as well as future interactions at AEM meetings and with the FDA. So from my take from the last 2 days, what I've seen is that it takes a variety of expertise to work in this multifaceted area. The product development starts with a clinical need, and that's the patients. So we had, for the first time in our CRCG workshops, patient representation in these groups. So I wanted to point that out, and I think that's an important perspective to keep in mind for as we work on any product development arenas. The second piece of putting this together is the engineers and translating some of the clinical needs into the products, and how do you develop those products in that manner that can be used by the patients. And along with that, the human factors engineering that goes with it. So the deliberate anthropometric approaches to making sure that we have good devices that can be used by patients to deliver drugs. We have the physicians who prescribe and can observe what goes on. And so that's another important aspect. Overlying all of that is our legal framework for getting products out in market, having our lawyers and our regulators that set in place some of the laws of our country, that how do we put these products in the market in a manner that's in line with how we envision the legal structure for getting products out of the marketplace. And so this is, and bringing into like what are pathways that are that have been used and tread well, but then also what other areas, what other pathways could we get there that maybe we haven't explored that we could explore to get there. Use of standards, use of other approaches to getting these drug device combination products. These are things that we need to think carefully about and consider as possibilities. And there are, some of them may require additional legal structures to allow them to happen, but nothing is impossible, right? So we could do move some of those forward. So some things to think about as we move forward in this arena. We do want to make note that this year is the 40th anniversary of Hatch-Waxman. So we want to celebrate that by making sure that we continue to have good generic drug products out there in the marketplace for the American public. This is our pathway for allowing for products that have done their duty, getting initial exposure to the patient population, but then allowing for the premise of equity and access to get a broader population, and to allow manufacturers, generic manufacturers, to make product for the general public. And so in line with that vision from Hatch-Waxman, we move forward in this space, and included in that space are these drug device combination products. So just want to say that this is an important thing that we're doing in this space, and it's following the intent of our legislators and our American public, and the demand for healthcare that we have in the United States in this manner. There are some aspects that are also international. We have manufacturers that are overseas, and we also have product development that occurs overseas. So tying those things in together to make sure that our US population benefits from those kinds of interactions is important. So with that, I'm going to just say have a great weekend, everyone, and look forward to continuing interactions in this space. Thank you.